When I first saw True Detective back in 2014, Rust Cohle became a sort of folk hero to me. I had grown up in a conservative Christian household, but had recently lost my faith.
This world is a fail.
And after losing my faith, the world changed so drastically that even the physical appearance of objects, like trees, were strange and alien to me. Nothing seemed to fit into categories anymore. Everything was chaos without form.
Might as well be living on the fucking moon.
And the rules and laws and meaning that I had relied on no longer existed. I was paralyzed by indecision and desperately searching for some kind of meaning to give my life direction. And so, when Rust Cohle described the world like this,
Giant gutter in outer space.
or like this,
I think human consciousness was a tragic misstep in evolution. We became too self-aware. Nature created an aspect of nature separate from itself. We are creatures that should not exist by natural law.
I thought, yeah, that's it. That's what I see. But at the same time, he was able to act in the world. And not just act, but act with efficiency and conviction. And to make matters even more confusing, his actions seemed to contradict his beliefs. For instance, his job is to solve crimes and save lives, but he believes that
The honorable thing for our species to do is deny our programming. Stop reproducing. Walk hand in hand into extinction. One last midnight, brothers and sisters opting out of a raw deal.
And so, despite his belief that human life isn't worth living, he still acts in order to save lives. Which makes me wonder,
What's the point of getting out of bed in the morning?
I tell myself I bear witness. The real answer is that it's obviously my programming. And I lack the constitution for suicide.
Rust Cohle is undeniably admirable. But why is this combination of a pessimistic philosophy and heroic action so attractive to us? And would it be possible for someone like him to exist in real life?
I'd consider myself a realist, all right, but in philosophical terms, I'm what's called a pessimist.
It's important that he says he's a realist first, because a realist doesn't necessarily have to be a pessimist. Let's loosely define a realist as someone who wants to see the world as it is and deal with it accordingly, as opposed to someone who wants to project a fantasy onto the world in order to make life easier to deal with.
What's it say about life? You gotta get together. Tell yourself stories that violate every law of the universe. Just to get through the goddamn day? Now, what's that say about your reality, Marty?
And so a realist has a consistent and coherent worldview, even if that worldview puts them outside of the community. While Rust is concerned with what's true, Marty is concerned with what's convenient. Marty believes what the people around him believe. He's a cultural Christian.
I mean, can you imagine if people didn't believe what things they get up to?
Exact same thing they do now, just out in the open.
Bullshit.
But Marty only needs to act like a Christian in public. In private, he can act however he wants. Rust, on the other hand, says things that make him hated by the people around him.
If the only thing keeping a person decent is the expectation of divine reward, then brother, that person is a piece of shit. And I'd like to get as many of them out in the open as possible.
But in private, acts selflessly for the sake of others. In other words, Rust's beliefs put him outside of the culture around him, while Marty's beliefs align with the culture around him. But both detectives contradict their beliefs with their actions.
One of the things I think is most admirable about him, to me at least, is that he has this very rigid code of honor that no one gave him, that seems to sit outside of the culture. That's why he's an oddball with the other police officers, because his code of honor has nothing to do with their cultural contexts. You know, one of the interesting dichotomies between the two men is that the one man has literally nothing governing him, and he keeps himself rigidly self-governed. And the one that has a family and should be more governed uses that as an excuse to go ungoverned.
Marty's beliefs and actions make sense. He gets his cake and eats it too.
How good is cake if you can't eat it?
But Cole's actions don't make sense. He gets the worst of both worlds. He's isolated from a community and simultaneously acts in service to that community. But because his actions are completely self-governed, he's able to act more effectively than Marty. He doesn't worry about what people will think or whether he'll get in trouble. He simply does his job in the way that seems best to him, even to his own detriment. And this gives him a superhero-like ability to act independently of the system that he works for.
I mean, badges ain't gonna get us near these people, so... No, I can't do what I need to do. We got watchdogs.
And so we admire Cole because his philosophy isolates him from others, while at the same time, his sacrificial actions serve others. But the question is, why? Why would anyone choose to live this way?
Some folks enjoy community, the common good.
Yeah, well, if the common good's gotta make up fairy tales, then it's not good for anybody.
There's an importance placed on honesty that runs through every episode. Honesty is treated as the highest virtue. Lying is a tool used to manipulate reality. And it's the true believers who suffer.
Been that way since one monkey looked at the sun and told the other monkey, he said, for you to give me your fucking share. People.
We live as human beings within a cloud of unknowing. Honesty is what matters to me, and honesty in the unknowability of your situation as a human being.
And the results of that honesty, or lack of honesty, become apparent when the present-day retelling of events doesn't match the reality of what we're seeing from the past.
And you know why the story's always the same 17 years gone? Because it only went down the one way.
As soon as we started to back off, man.
Blam! Bullets cut through right near Rush's head. We dove opposite ways into the high growth, but they'd already spotted us, and they had something high velocity. Boom! Blow apart this tree between us. I mean, it was on.
Heavy shit. Fucking ferns and whatnot bursting all around us, bark flying off the trees. I mean, we were in a fucking shitstorm. While I was hunkered down behind this old decrepit boat, Captain America, Marty Hart, decides he's gonna run deep into the woods, flank around the back of the house where Ledoux's firing at us, right? Well, he sneaks up behind Ledoux, and just as Ledoux turns, bam, popped one off in him. Headshot, clean, dropped him.
This lie that Rust and Marty participate in together rips reality in two.
I can say that I walked away from the experience with a greater respect for the sanctity of human life, yeah.
And this creation of an alternate reality, this creation of a fantasy in which Rust and Marty are heroes who survived a shootout, this is the sin they have to atone for. Ripping reality in two is what defines a person as bad. But this wasn't their mistake per se. Their mistake was ripping reality in two for their own benefit. After all, the act of going undercover is the act of lying, of creating a fantasy. And
World needs bad men. We keep the other bad men from the door.
but lying for one's own benefit creates darkness and confusion. It obscures truth. So they had to act selflessly in order to pay their debt and mend reality.
Why would I ever help you?
Because you have a debt.
But again, why? Why act selflessly?
Death would be a deliverance for him. It'd also be a cop-out, in a way. It'd also be... He was not a man who was going to give himself amnesty and didn't allow it from the rest of the world. He wouldn't give himself an out. And while living in his head and heart and spirit was more of a hell than arguably dying, there was no alternative. That's not negotiable for that man. And that's why he was that's why he was the best detective that ever walked the earth. That's why he was such a superhero in a way, to have that singular. You don't go, oh, I wish I was him. No, but you go like, wow, that constitution, that clarity of identity. Talk about a measure in a man's constitution. He didn't allow anybody off the hook, especially himself.
What do you got the cross for in your apartment?
It's a form of meditation. I contemplate the moment in the garden, the idea of allowing your own crucifixion.
I always took Rust as his complaint is essentially Job's complaint,
Right.
which is that if you believe in a personal God who has a destiny for everyone, well, then you're just a character in his story. And Job's complaint is, I am a character in his story, and I do not like this story, and I do not like the limitations of my character.
The truth is, there is no answer to the question, why would anyone live this way? We don't choose our stories. Everyone either has to act out the story they're given or cease to act.
Do you like your job?
Not exactly. It's worthwhile. I'm good at it.
We are ultimately powerless in the face of nature, God, everything. And the more individuated we become, the more painful and lonely life becomes.
Human consciousness was a tragic misstep in evolution.
It's a sick cosmic joke that the closer we get to truth, the further we get from meaning. And no matter who we are or what we believe, we all throw up our hands and say, why, God?
Me, I.
And so, could Cole exist in real life? Of course. People like Cole have always existed. Anyone who's ever reached a place of utter hopelessness, but continued to lace up their boots and go to work, is like Cole. This kind of person has been completely stripped bare of any selfish motivation, because all they want to do is die. And if death is a deliverance, then living is a sacrifice. And if everything is meaningless, and humans should
Walk hand in hand into extinction.
then it's not even a sacrifice for the sake of anything. It's like a machine that's been abandoned, but continues doing its job because it doesn't know how to do anything else. And yet, I find this kind of life to be incredibly heroic. It's not for the sake of an afterlife, or with the hope that life will get better. Instead, it's the mundane acceptance that I'm a character in a story, and the story fucking sucks. But who knows? Maybe there's a way through to the other side. An ending to the story that feels satisfying and makes all the suffering worth it.
It's just one story. The oldest.
What's that?
Light versus dark.
Or maybe there's not.